We're opening with a double keynote featuring Hunter Lovins and Scott King on why students and entrepreneurs will solve climate. Most of you would be familiar with Hunter Lovins. She's the founder of Natural Capitalism Solutions and co-founder and former CEO for strategy of the Rocky Mountain Institute, now RMI, and has a very long history of identifying effective pathways for change while working within our capitalist system. She's also a faculty member for Bard's MBA in Sustainability and the author of many books, including A Finer Future, Creating an Economy in Service of Life. You can ask her more about her books and look at what she has to offer with her own organization. And so, Hunter, I would ask you on stage now to give us some of your enthusiasm.
Martin, thank you. Thank you for all that you do. What a thrill to be in a room filled with my heroes. We all stand on the shoulders of giants, and we have here people like Martin, Leslie Glostrom. Leslie has been fighting the coal plants in Colorado darn near forever, and is going to win. They will be closed down sooner than even Excel thinks. For fundamental economic reasons, they are no longer the cheap source of energy. And Excel's own numbers show this. A couple of years ago, they put out a request for more capacity, wanted, 1,100 megawatts. They got 58,000 bid. They thought gas would come in cheap. Gas came in at 4 cents. Wind came in at a bit below 2, solar a bit above 2. Wind, solar, plus storage. So fixed firm power, 3 cents a kilowatt hour. These are Excel's numbers. This was 2017. We had a different president, so they said, solar tariffs, got to bid it again. Bid again. Same numbers. I believe now it is Dubai, the Emirates, that have the world record for cheapest solar, 1.1 cent a kilowatt hour. Portugal's coming in easily 1.1, 1.2, 3, and is now 100% renewably powered. This is happening.
Hip, hip, hooray.
Yes, this is a time in which we all feel it's so urgent. And yes, it's so urgent. The climate crisis is very real. It's here. It's us. We caused it. The good news is we know how to solve it. 2 things. Renewable energy, so eliminate emissions because we are no longer using any fossils. Simple enough. And doing this is now everywhere on Earth cheaper than running any kind of fossil. Yes, the oil companies right now are enjoying a run. Let's see if I can get the exact figures on this. These buggers are making $2.8 billion a day profit. $2.8 billion a day profit. This is not total revenues. This is profit above what it costs them to run and pay their investors. This is rent, pure profit. So when people say, we can't possibly constrain the oil companies, we need them. Yeah, bullshit. Pure and simple, that's bullshit. And it is time to start saying this. This, over their 50-year run, over $50 trillion in pure profit. And I will leave with Martin the reference to that. It's a Guardian article out a week or so back where folks did the numbers. And we're still winning. even despite fossil getting, what is it now, $5.9 trillion a year in subsidies just to the fossil industries. Solar, wind, storage, Ron Larson's biochar. What'd you say? Biochar is now doubling? Every 2 years, the amount of biochar is doubling. And biochar, of course, is you take organic waste, cook it at relatively low temperature, pyrolyze it, and you get an energy stream, and you get a soil amendment, which dramatically increases the capacity of agriculture. We live at a time now where, because of the Ukraine war, it's very hard to get fertilizer. Potash, which most of which is mined in Ukraine, is also in short supply, even if there wasn't a war on. And we know how, through things like biochar, through regenerative agriculture, to produce all of the food that we need, that the world needs, with no fertilizers, no herbicides, no pesticides. And doing that takes carbon out of the air, puts it back in the soil, which is where it belongs. We know from the geology, from the evolutionary biology, that, 50 million years ago, 60 million years ago, the Earth was at 1,000 parts per million concentration of CO2. Anybody know what it was when humans evolved? 280. Good, Steve. What happened? 1,000 down to 280. Where did the carbon go? Yeah, how? Grazing animals. I will send to Martin, so he can post for you, a paper by a guy named Greg Ritalik showing that what decarbonized the Earth were actually, to start with, little horses, the pre-horses. 1,000 parts per million, the Earth is carpeted with trees. So people say, oh, save the climate, plant a tree. No, for a number of reasons. Primarily, trees have most of their biomass above ground. They get old, they die, they fall over, rot, emit the carbon. Now, trees are burning. California, announcement out this morning, California has lost most of the offsets that it thought it had achieved from last year's forest fires. Don't plant a tree. Eat grass beef. Grass-fed, grass-finished beef. When animals eat grass, the roots slough polysaccharides, sugars. That feeds the microbiological community in the soil, that mineralizes the carbon that's in the sugar, that's in the roots, that's in the manure. Grazing herds, think about this place before there were very many humans here. And yes, we stand on the unceded land of the Arapaho and Cheyenne and about 10 other tribes. What was here? Bison, buffalo, elk, vast herds of animals that moved across the grasslands, eating everything in front of them, trampling everything under them, fertilizing everything behind them. They didn't come back until the grass had regrown. As a result of which, taking carbon out of the air and putting it into the soil. Now, it matters how you do this, just as with solar, with agrovoltaics, with photovoltaics, with all the cool technologies that are now coming on, heat pumps. Yes, you have to do it right. Animals need to be dense packed. They need to mimic the way the native herds moved across the land. But when you do that, we know you can put a ton of carbon per acre per year from the air into the soil. If we did that on the world's grasslands, it's a big if, but doing this is profitable. If we did that over 30 to 60 years' time, we would get back to 280 parts per million concentration of CO2. We solve the climate crisis profitably. So this is what entrepreneurs are doing. You want an offset? Check out a company called Grassroots Carbon, run, amazingly enough, by a man who used to be at Royal Dutch Shell. He saw this come across the Shell Game Changers site, and he said, that's what I want to do. Quit, and now runs Grassroots Carbon. That's where I get my offsets. He takes the money that we use to offset the fact that, I fly around the planet. Somebody was complaining about a gal in the UN who has a big carbon footprint. I said, look at me. But my carbon is offset. The money goes to ranchers who are practicing regenerative agriculture. If you do this in places, for example, India, and again, I'll give Martin this reference, there's a man named Vijay Kumar working primarily with women's self-help groups in very small villages, farmers who are landless or who are farming half a hectare, helping them transition from what they had been sold, the Gates Foundation funded Green Revolution Take Two, big machines, big chemicals, big industry, to regenerative agriculture. 5 principles: minimal disturbance of the soil, so don't plow it up and leave it bare. Armor on the soil, biomass laying on the soil year-round, living root in the soil year-round. Diverse crops and animal impact. In India, they don't eat the cows, but they have to have them because it's the manure, the urine, that gives them the ability to build a mycorrhizal inoculant for the seeds. So when the seed goes into the ground, it has a jump start. And Vijay has shown how farmers can triple their income, have harvests year around, rather than having to wait for the monsoons, which are now becoming unreliable. They can keep planting year-round because every 1% increase in soil organic matter is 5 to 10 tons of carbon and 20 to 40,000 gallons of water holding capacity. In a hotter, drier world, this is maybe more important even than the carbon. So we have the solutions. We live at a time of a transformation of paradigm. Why does it feel so messy right now? We are living in the Copernican world. We think that the Earth is the center of the universe and everything goes around us. We need a Galileo to point out that, no, the Earth goes around the sun, and our solar system is a tiny part of a massive galaxy, which is a tiny part of a massive universe. Think about that mind shift that humans went through. We are going through a similarly transformative mind shift, away from the way in which we've made decisions top down, in many cases patriarchal, hierarchical, to community-based, to entrepreneur-led, to a diversity of solutions, and away from the dominance of fossil fuels and big industry to community, to the kinds of solutions that we want to live amongst. This is going to be a wrenching transformation, and yet it is inevitable. If you read Thomas Kuhn's Structure of Scientific Revolution, he says when a paradigm no longer explains reality in science, scientists start getting itchy. They don't want to change. They're very happy with the old paradigm, and they will defend it fiercely. But the evidence is against them. And scientists being scientists at some point say, this better explains observed reality than what we've been doing. And at that point, the paradigm shifts. Until it shifts, it feels very uncomfortable. And this is why it feels very uncomfortable to all of us right now. The climate crisis is real, it's here. It is existential. We solve this one or nothing else matters. And so it's frustrating to all of us who know that we can solve it, and we see things like the oil company profits today. It's like, oh. And we see things like the Build Back Better Act becoming the Inflation Reduction Act. Nonetheless, if this bugger passes, hopefully today, I'm not a praying person, but please, it'll create 1.4 million new jobs by cutting air pollution. It'll avoid 3,600 American deaths every year by 2030. It'll cut greenhouse gas emissions by 40% below 2005 levels. This is worth doing. So whatever reservations we may have about the bribes paid to Mansion and Cinema, it's what they are. Whatever reservations we have, this is a good thing to get passed. And when it gets passed, we should all write to John Hickenlooper and say thank you, because apparently he was the one who engineered getting Mansion on board. Go, John. I am sure all of you have had the same fights I've had with Frackenlooper. He did a good job here. And we need to say that. When politicians do the right thing, we need to say thank you. I hope, Scott's going to laugh, I am biting my tongue because I have come into possession of a really big idea, which I can't talk about. But I hope within a month, maybe 6 months' time, it needs to be within 6 months' time, Martin will have me back to talk to you about this big idea. Because if we do it, I'm going to need every one of you. And a snapshot of it, 1 billion heroes. And you guys are the first. I can't do this without you. None of us can do this without, daggone it, I left my little piece of paper over there. Heck with it. That's Scott's introduction. We can't do this without every one of the groups like CRES that have for so long been carrying this torch. We can't do it without universities. We can't do it without the scientific entities, NREL. It's going to take every one of us stepping up and committing to be a climate hero. But I now believe that it's possible. I'm working with a couple people who are senior, very senior UN officials who are going to leave their jobs and run this. And I've said I'm in, however I can be of service. This is, I'm here to talk about entrepreneuring. This is the ultimate piece of entrepreneuring. We are building this from nothing. On the other hand, we're building it with all of you, and so that's not nothing. Here's hoping. It is now my true honor to introduce my friend, my colleague, Scott King. Scott's an entrepreneur, built a company and quit. Walked away from it because he said, climate's more important. He's now putting his life, all of his resources, into a new organization that he calls Mission Zero, working with university students, particularly working through the University of Colorado. The idea is to take this nationwide, and we're going to take it global. So I give you Scott King. Thank you for being you.
Thanks, Hunter. Are we good? All right. Full disclosure, I am Mission Zero is a project within Natural Capital Solutions, so thank you for being our sponsor. Let's see, can we go to the beginning of the slide deck? There we go. I think I figured it out. Technology. Let me start with a little bit about me. So I'm an engineer. In fact, one of my colleagues that I used to call on a couple of decades ago, I met again this morning. I don't know if I can see. There he is. Worked at Seagate. I used to sell for Hewlett-Packard. I graduated the University of Colorado, electrical engineering, and I worked at HP for about 15 years. And then I did the startup thing. So I was an entrepreneur. I was working on a startup in Colorado Springs, which failed. And I think that's actually a good thing, because until you fail, you don't understand really what it takes to build a sustainable and a long-lasting company. And so my brother and I, we started a company called ReadyTalk, which is an audio, web, video conferencing company. And it was one of the best companies to work for. Oh, I'm going the wrong way. By Outside Magazine. It won one of the best companies to work for in the Front Range for probably 10 or 12 times. And so we built it around this idea that culture matters. The organization that you're building, where people are aligned with the values and they're aligned with the mission of the business, is super important. After Dan and I were recognized by Ernst & Young as Entrepreneur of the Year in the Rocky Mountain region and 4th in the US. And so it was a nice accolade. So starting a business is hard. I'll put it out there. There's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of things that you have to do in terms of trying to figure out how it all kind of comes together. And so entrepreneurship is really interesting. It's for people, so being a double E, it's kind of that degree where it applies. You're a problem solver. You're working in technology and spaces where you're always problem solving. And that's what entrepreneurs do. They look at a problem, they say, how can I solve that? How can I solve that uniquely? And can I scale it? Can I make a business out of it? And you're always doing that. And so I learned a ton in business as what it means to be an entrepreneur. And I was very connected to CU. My wife went to CU, all 3 of my kids went to CU, all of my siblings went to CU, my mom went to CU, I got all the CU basketball, all the CU football games. So I was very much a buff, true black and gold. And so when Dan and I sold the company to PGI, we retired. That was one of those moments where you didn't expect to retire, and then all of a sudden you're at home with your wife that hasn't seen you in about 20 years, and you're trying to figure out that relationship. And what happened there was an interesting period of time. I'm going to get back to the Leeds School of Business, but oops, I missed a picture. Oh, this is the old slide deck. Okay. I have a picture in the other slide deck. I added one more slide, and I don't know if you've seen it. It's Trump, and he's on stage, and he's got this sign that says "Trump digs coal." I don't know if you've seen that, and it was a big thing. And I mean, like, I went through 4 years of Trump and a pandemic, and personally, I'm going to go a little off script. Personally, I got to a point where I looked into a deep, dark abyss. When you look at what was going on a political landscape, when you look at what was going on with climate, when you looked at all the instability that was happening around you, and it got to a point where I could not figure out how people were thinking about things that they were thinking about. I mean, I couldn't relate to it. I couldn't talk to anybody on the other political side because it was just too uncomfortable. And it was a really interesting time. And I'm a really positive person. I am a glass half full all day long. But I got to a place where I started designing a bunker. A bunker. I did. I can show you pictures of the architect. I mean, in fact, we're going to do a Q&A. One of the questions is, what will you think about in terms of the design criteria for a bunker, right? Well, how do you design that? Because there's a whole process of going through solving that problem. And then I took a step back and I said, that's crazy. My friend said, you're crazy, and you need to do something positive. So climate change is one of those things where you've got mitigation and adaptation, right? And the bunker was adaptation. And I said, well, how do I help solve this problem in a positive, meaningful way? And so that's where Mission Zero came from. So so I went to, after I retired, I said, I got to do something. I traveled and I golfed and I did all that stuff, and that wasn't enough. And so I started to mentor students in entrepreneurship, and then I started to help teach entrepreneurship classes at CU. And what happened in that experience was understanding the impact that faculty can have on students going through the university and on the curriculum that they actually teach. And so, so I was, helping teach these classes, and the first thing that was amazing, working with this professor, Vizda Carson, I said, well, what are you teaching for marketing? And he says, well, why don't you put that deck together? I'm like, don't you have this already done? Doesn't so you have a marketing deck somewhere? No, you do it. And what do you teach for sales and entrepreneurship, and how do you take a product to market? Well, put that deck together too. So I'm like, okay. And so it was really interesting that, and the class was really cool because it brought an entrepreneur into a classroom with students and had a professional, faculty that did the hard work. And then I came in and said, here's my experiences. But the students got great insight in what it takes to build a company, because it's more than just a good idea. It's all the things you have to think about in terms of taking a product to market. Can it be profitable? What's your channel? How are you going to do it? What's your competitive advantage? All of those things happen. So it was a great experience. What I realized is that to solve climate change, we need everybody working on it. And what I was realizing is that if we can engage the students at the university and every part of the university to work on climate change, to have an experience of climate change. So this is a story that kind of stuck with me. It was an experience. So my son Andrew was going to school. He is an applied math and a computer science major. He just graduated last year. And one of his homework assignments that he brought home, not because I could help him, but he just needed somebody to bounce ideas off of, was a Python programming class, and it was to map out a data set over time and distance and location. And the data set they used was temperature modeling from climate, from all these different time periods over time and different locations. And that was the data set they used. And I'm like, that is so cool. And then Andrew mapped it out and said, look at that curve. That's disturbing, right? And so you think about this, that's a programming class where students are learning how to program in Python, but they're learning the implications of climate change as part of that. So that one stuck in my head. It was like, wow, that's kind of interesting. That professor had figured out how to infuse climate science into a course at CU that you wouldn't think would be applicable, right? So how do you engage not just the environmental students in climate action and climate, education, but every student, whether it's in business, whether it's in engineering, whether it's in marketing and communication, or the sciences and the arts. Every one of those areas can incorporate elements of climate, because if you think about climate change, there are many, many ways to think about it. There's the climate justice side of it, there's the energy side of it, there's the agriculture side of it, there's the industrial, there's the electrification, homes, transportation, across the board. So basically, CU is one of the best, if not the best, climate research universities in the world. And it's my home university. So I went to CU and I said, I want to help students work on climate change. I'm a donor. I have some money because Dan and I sold this business. And so what my kids and my wife decided to do, we're going to put $1 million into this program, Mission Zero. We're going to take half of it and we're going to fund different programs to help students work on climate change. And I'm going to take the other half and I'm going to promote it to other donors. And that's what Mission Zero is. So it's fundamentally based on helping students at the university learn and engage on climate through every part of their academic experience. It's done through engagement with faculty, because students can't do this without the support of faculty. And it's supported by the community and donors that fund and mentor these students through this project. So here's some pictures of various students working on some of the programs. We have climate events, and New Venture Challenge is a business challenge for CU. It's every student at the university can participate. We funded a climate track for New Venture Challenge. Can can students create business ideas around climate that can actually be implemented? This team here won it, and their idea was if you give cows a small diet of this seaweed, it reduces their methane by 80%. And it was amazing. The student team then went through this whole business plan on how you manufacture this additive to cows. And so it was amazing. So there's a couple of pillars of this program. One of them is I created a Climate Action Expo. So it's an expo that's part of the CU Campus Sustainability Summit. And it's a way for students to show off what they've been working on in climate, their climate projects. And part of that is we created a fund for students to have access to build these projects, so they can get between $500 and $2,000 to build these climate projects. This was the first time we had done it. It was an amazing success. We had over 50 climate projects that students presented. Over 1,000 people went through this summit. We had awards for students afterwards. It was absolutely fantastic. The other thing that I learned is there are some really passionate and amazing faculty that care about this issue a lot. And so we have faculty in every single school working on various aspects of climate. And leveraging that faculty to engage students and, more importantly, other faculty about how they can take the science, like energy, for example. How do we do storytelling around climate change in a writing class that people can connect to? And how do we teach energy to an arts and science student? How do we connect those things together? The other pillar of this is students can't learn about climate action, climate change, unless faculty engage them on it. And so we've got to figure out how to get faculty to start to train and educate and engage students on climate change in every single course. And so, so we funded this program called Climate Across the Curriculum. And it's the idea that faculty, and by the way, so curriculum is like a very, it's controlled by faculty. So an outsider coming in and saying, I want you to modify your curriculum is like a taboo. But if you fund and say, hey, we want to just incorporate science into the educational experience of students and have faculty train faculty and engage them on how to do that, that works. And so this got blessed by the provost. And in fact, he's speaking at it. It's happening Monday and Tuesday of next week. We're training over 50 faculty on the science of climate and how to incorporate that science and that learning into their coursework. We had about 3 times that many faculty that wanted to participate. We just didn't have the budget for it. But hopefully next year, we're going to have it even bigger. So that was huge. Now, startups are fun. They never go the way you want. They never go the way you think. It's just a lot of things happen. So I started this, and one of my concerns was I'm a tech entrepreneur. I sell product. And I had an advisor who says, no, but this is really a nonprofit initiative that you're doing. I said, yeah, that's true, but I don't know what a nonprofit is. I don't know how to run one. I'm like, literally don't know how to run a nonprofit. What I realized after I did this, that I don't like to ask for money. I didn't realize that about myself. I'm running a nonprofit, I'm executive director, and I don't like to ask for money. Well, that's not great. And it took me an entire year to figure that out. So I've got to they call this term pivot. So you got to take your business model, realize, wow, your assumption here didn't work out. How do you now pivot to something that you can adapt from, right? So I'm going to sell something. I am going to sell an RC car. This is the RC car I'm going to sell. It's a mini RC, so it races indoor. And they're really expensive. I'm selling them for $5,000 each. So I have a box of them in the back for you guys. But the idea is, and I'm also a marketer. So this marketing campaign is about, it actually came from George Sparks, who runs the Denver Museum for Nature and Science. He emailed me and said, hey, we'd like to bring Formula E, which is the electric version of Formula One, to Denver. Would you help me do that. I said, hell yeah. In fact, last year, I'm going to be out of time soon, but last year I sponsored a engineering capstone project. Kyrie Baker helped with this one. It's this engineering team that built an exhibit on how to modernize our grid by using the energy storage in electric cars, so helping transition to electric cars, and using that energy to deploy more renewables and build a more modern grid. And they built this amazing exhibit. So I have another project I'm sponsoring this year. I am going to ask you to ask me a question at the Q&A time. But this supports all the programs that we run. It supports Climate Action Expo, it supports climate across the curriculum, it supports climate project funding, our internships. And the idea is give this to businesses, we brand it, we give them a landing page, we run all these events around it, and then they get branding at the Expo as well. And so it's really a way for businesses to support students working on climate action. And that's the expensive car. And then if this works, if we can figure out how to connect the community and businesses supporting university students working on climate action with faculty that are engaged and supportive, this model is interesting. And that's why Formula CU is really the formula for how do we make this a program that can be adapted to other universities. And so that's what I'm building with Mission Zero. And I certainly appreciate your time. And I think we're going to open it up to some questions.
We have 5 minutes for questions, so if there are any, let me walk the microphone to you. We're now live, and you can ask away. Okay. Phil Nelson with Citizens Climate Lobby.
So my question is, has this been transported to here in Golden, to the Colorado School of Mines?
It hasn't. We're still working just within the CU infrastructure, but we've talked to CSU, ASU, some other schools, Stanford, around this model as well. And so we're at the early stages. We really still need to make sure it works and is fundamental at CU Boulder, but it absolutely can be applied to any university. So one of the things that we're doing with Climate Across the Curriculum is we're building digital toolkits on how faculty can engage students in climate action. So it's going to be all online material that other faculty can pull from or get ideas from. And so we're going to be putting that out to anybody that wants to look at it.
Hold on one sec. Microphone coming for the folks online.
Hi, I'm Eric with the Colorado Energy Office. I'm 35. This is for you, Hunter. I'm 35. I've been paying pretty good attention to politics since I was 16 or 17, and I can never recall us raising taxes specifically on oil and gas companies, which is what we're about to do with this new act. How did that happen?
People like you. People in the energy office, people like Leslie, people like all of you who have been going to the hearings, who have been submitting written testimony, who get active, who pay attention to what's happening in local politics and then jump in and do something. That's the way politics moves. The big boys know this. They do it with money. Money is the magic ordinary people can do, and they have a lot of it. We have a lot of us, billion heroes. And it takes really just one ordinary person standing in front of the Oil and Gas Commission, in front of the Public Utility Commission, going and talking to your boss and saying, I care, with an authentic voice, to render all those millions, billions coming from the companies pretty irrelevant, because politicians are, after all, voted in by people. The money helps them get their message out, but it's people who vote them in. And when they perceive that people are organizing, they start acting. So thank you, and thanks to all of you. Does that make sense?
And you'll need to, I'll hold it for you, if you don't mind.
I wanted to come back to the question of enteric methane release. FAO had a big hearing just a week ago, and the concept of cattle was not on there. Could you just add the word enteric methane release to your story?
Sure, enteric methane is cows burp and fart, and they do release a fair amount of methane. However, just do basic math. How many bison were here before there were 8 billion people? How many Sega antelope across the steppes of Africa, steppes of Asia, wildebeest across Africa? There were billions upon billions of grazing animals, and we did not have a climate crisis. The climate crisis comes from burning fossil fuels. When animals graze with their heads down, which is how they graze, they burp into methanotropic bacteria which exist in grass, not in feedlots. And that's why it matters grass-fed, grass-finished. If you're buying animals that have been fed on grass, heads down in grass the whole time, methane is not a problem. Who knew?
But the science is not with you on this subject.
Yeah, the science is with me on this subject, and I'll send to Martin a compendium of the science on this. Where you get the problem with enteric methane is when you put cows in feedlots, you feed them corn and soybeans, which they were never designed to eat. Yeah, you can add seaweed to the corn and soybeans and it helps, but leave cows on grass. It's where they're supposed to be.
I can find no literature on this,
I'll send it to you.
please.
Well, we'll wrap it up for this session and meet again in about 10 minutes to start at 10 o'clock for the next session. So thank you again to Hunter.
Thank
and
you, you
Scott.
all.
Yeah.